千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now. To be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process of the Tao. Let's get right back into 67 with a recap about what we talked about previously at the beginning of this chapter. This chapter has a Chinese title, and its important title, 三寶章, Three Treasures Chapter. So the Chinese title tells us what is the most important thing about the contents, the three treasures of the Tao, sometimes referred to as the three treasures of Lao Tzu. Among the three treasures, there's one that is clearly the most important, and we're going to need to talk about it in great depth and detail, and that is the first of the three treasures. Before we get into that, let's talk about the sectional analysis that we did previously. This is a relatively long chapter among all the verses in the Tao Te Ching. As you can see, it's got 23 lines. So what we did last time, as we always do, is that we identify the repeating characters and we use that knowledge as a way to figure out where the sectional breaks are. And here you see 5 sections. And notes that this is not an exact science, so people can do different things with it. They can break it up into major sections and minor sections. In this particular case, I chose to keep it simple. Now, among these different sections, the first one we talked about last time, the first one is about the Great Tao. It's the introduction to this particular chapter, the opener, where Lao Tzu basically talks about the greatness of the Tao and how the Tao is beyond compare. And as we discussed last time, to say that it is beyond compare is simply another way to refer to the formless Tao having no boundaries, no limits, that it is essentially infinity we're talking about. So the Tao is infinite, and being unlimited, that is why it is great. So we got to the end of that discussion, and we started talking about the main topic of this chapter, the three treasures. So I brought up the fact that this set of three treasures, this is not the only set of three treasures, quite the opposite. Within Chinese culture, there are many other sets of three treasures, and we did like an overview of those treasures last time. And as I mentioned previously, there are some sets of three treasures that are very easy to find. And then there are some that are more difficult to find. And there's also some confusion among them. If you were to go to the internet and look them up, you may not be able to receive accurate information. And I'll talk about those in a moment. Today, as you can see, our purpose is to go deeply into the three treasures. And the sections continue on to talk about the three treasures specifically. The third section that you see here is talking about the reasoning behind the three treasures, why they are treasures. Then the section after that is talking about the opposite of the three treasures. What happens when you are using just one aspect of a particular treasure, but then skipping over the important stuff, which is the essence of the Tao. And then the conclusion, the last section there, returns back to the first treasure, which is all about compassion. So let's recap a little bit what we talked about last time, which was an overview of the three treasures. So I started out talking about the ancient perspective on existence. So as they looked around, the ancients saw that existence itself could be seen in three different ways. There is the world above, the sky, the heaven, and it's full of activities. There is the world below our feet, the earth itself. It's a world unto itself with many things happening. Then between heaven and earth, that is where we human beings inhabit the world. And certainly a lot of things going on with human beings as well. So the three aspects of existence, each one of them gets three treasures identified as the three most significant items associated with that aspect of existence. For heaven, it's basically about sources of illumination. So it is the sun, the moon, and the stars. So not difficult to figure out why the ancients saw that the sun was the brightest source of light of all. It is dominant during the day. And at night, a less bright but equally significant source of light is the moon, and it is surrounded by many points of light, the stars. Then they looked around the earth to look for correspondence, and they could see that the earth itself, there's water as a significant element. Then because they had already discovered fire, they saw the water and fire dynamics, that the two things, they act on each other. That is, fire can boil water for cooking, water can put out fire. Then, between the two, they also looked around and felt breeze or wind, and they categorized that as neither water nor fire, therefore the third treasure. So what about the five elements with, for instance, wood and metal? Well, those are thought to be from the earth itself. So the three treasures would not be that, but would be the elements that we can find in the earth. Or I should say, all around us. Certainly, as the ancients were walking around on the face of this planet, they could see water in the streams, rivers, and the ocean. They knew that they could make fire, and they feel the movements of air as they are walking around. So those are the three treasures. Then what about the human beings that walk around in the environment that is encapsulated by heaven above and the earth below? So they coined the three treasures as essence, energy, and spirit. So these also became the three treasures involved with human beings from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective. And due to the popularity of traditional Chinese medicine in Western society, many people have encountered that. Some people study it. Some people have been treated using traditional Chinese medicine techniques. So the three treasures that you see at the bottom there, humans, essence, energy, spirit, those tend to be rather popular and well known in the West. If you were to look them up on the internet, you can easily find them. But then there are sets of three treasures that are less well known, and we'll talk about some of those now. So last time, I showed one by one the three major schools of thought that are encapsulated in Eastern thought, Eastern philosophies. Typically, the three major schools are identified as Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. Of the three, probably I would say the most popular, most well-known in the West would be Buddhism. There are many people who get involved with that or study it, and there are practicing Buddhists in the West as well. And probably less popular, but still well-known, relatively well-known, would be Taoism. That's what we're doing. That's what we talk about. And many people don't really know the difference between Buddhism and Taoism. And my hope is that as we have our conversations, and as I continuously point out differences and similarities, that you can listen to these talks and develop a clearer idea about the difference between the two. Probably the least well-known is Confucianism. Yes, people are aware of Confucius, but if you think about what people actually know about Confucius in popular culture, it's mostly just a bunch of sayings that are supposedly from Confucius, but most of them are not actually quotes by Confucius. Some are jokes, some are fortune cookie sayings. In general, people don't really know or understand the teachings of Confucius. In the East, it's a different story. Confucius' teachings are well known. There are many quotes, there are many sayings that are used every day in regular speech. People will quote them to make a point. So there's a definite difference when we want to research into any of these schools of thought. Some things are easy to find in Asia, in the East, while difficult to find in the West. And I would actually point to the first one, the one to the left, Confucianism. It's actually got a set of three treasures as well that we talked about last time. But it is difficult to find them in the West. So last time, I told everyone what the three treasures of Confucius are, and we have wisdom, benevolence, and courage. This is one of the sets that if you were to look it up on the internet, you can type in search keywords, three treasures of Confucius, or three treasures of Confucianism, and you end up with the three treasures of traditional Chinese medicine that we were talking about before. Essence, energy, and spirit. Those do not belong to Confucius at all. Those had origins from 5,000 years ago, 2,500 years before the time of Confucius, in the oldest days, in the original practicing Tao philosophy that included also philosophy about human health. So it's back in the days of the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, that we had the original three treasures of human beings, nothing to do with Confucius. Confucius came around 2,500 years later, and his philosophy about life included the three treasures about wisdom, benevolence, and courage. And Confucius has specific things to say about why these were the most important three. It is important to be wise so that you will not be confused. You will not be having constant doubts. You will not be lost or disoriented. You know what is going on. It is important for everyone to be benevolent. The benevolent people are good and kind. They treat everyone with respect. They act in humane ways. It is important to be kind and good. And courage, also important, because armed with the philosophies of Confucius, one need not fear anything in life. No matter what life throws at you, you have the wisdom of Confucian teachings to help you handle them. Therefore, you will naturally have courage, another important factor. So the reason why there is confusion about the three treasures is simply because of the language and cultural barriers. There are so many things that are translated incorrectly. There are so many misconceptions and distortions. It is a job and a half to correct them as we come across them. So the same is true in the other direction. If you were to immerse yourself deeply into Eastern culture, you will find that the things you knew in Western culture that made its way across the cultural barrier there are oftentimes simply wrong and at best distorted and twisted and sometimes beyond recognition. So the same is true. The same distortion happens both ways. So hopefully we have an opportunity to set the record straight. Let's talk about a set of three treasures that's popular and well known in the West. And here I'm referring to the three treasures of Buddhism. Sometimes you can find them online listed as the three jewels of Buddhism. Whether called treasures or jewels, they are the same. So there's no differences in opinion when it comes to the three treasures. They are the Buddha, that's the Shakyamuni Buddha, who lived roughly 2,500 years ago, taught Buddhism in India. And Dharma, the Dharmic lessons of the Buddha are the teachings of Buddhism, and they are precious. They are spiritual truths that illuminate. And the people who study them, the people who follow them and practice them, the practitioners, that will be Sangha. So Sangha, the community of practitioners, would be originally referring to the Buddhist monks and nuns. And some have chosen to expand the definition to include those who have not yet become monks or nuns and perhaps have no intention of doing so, and yet still study and apply Buddhist teachings and support the Sangha, those who have taken the vow to renounce the material world to become monks or nuns. And last time, I talked about how we can use analogies to explain the three treasures of Buddhism. The Buddha is like a medical doctor treating sentient beings. Dharma is like medicine that alleviates suffering. And Sangha is like nursing care, watching over, helping one another to maintain the path of healing and spiritual liberation. So those are the three treasures or jewels of Buddhism. These are quite well known. These are easily found in the West. A lot of information about that. Now, a closely related set of three treasures comes from Zen Buddhism. So Zen Buddhism had its origins in Buddhism itself. A patriarch of Buddhism, the Bodhidharma, founded the Zen Buddhism tradition as the first patriarch of Zen Buddhism. And the teachings of Bodhidharma passed down through the generations. And this was taking place in ancient China. So the teachings were greatly influenced by the ideas from the Tao tradition as well. So it went on generation after generation until it went from the first patriarch to the second, the third, and so on until the sixth generation. Huineng is the sixth patriarch of Zen Buddhism. Huineng had a powerful intuitive understanding of Dharma, of Dharmic teachings. So he clarified that the three treasures from his perspective can be seen as awakening, correctness, and clarity. These three are next to impossible to find in the West. Searching for the three treasures of Huineng, it would be difficult to really find reference material on that. It exists mostly just platform sutra. But what do they mean? Well, as we talked about last time, the three treasures of Huineng have a great deal to do with the three jewels of Buddhism, or the three treasures of Buddhism. Awakening, what is that? It's actually about becoming the Buddha. Buddha, there's misconception associated with that. Misconception such as Buddha is worshipped as a deity. In reality, in the advanced levels of Buddhism, one learns that the Buddha is in fact not a deity, even though in many parts of the world, he is still worshipped as such. The truth is, there are many Buddhas, and anyone can become a Buddha. A Buddha is simply a human being who has experienced true spiritual awakening. It's the realization of the greater reality all around us. It is what we call enlightenment. So it's better actually to talk about one of the primary treasures of Buddhism, the Buddha, as this right here. It's actually not Buddha, but more like Buddhahood. The becoming, the attainment, the realization, the awakening. That's actually truer to reality. Second one, correctness. This is drawn from the essence of Dharmic teachings. Dharma, the second treasure of Buddhism, is all about spiritual truths, that which is eternally correct. And the Buddha taught about the right mindfulness, the right state of mind, the right intention. All of that can be summarized into the essence of correctness. And here you see why Huineng is considered to have such a powerful understanding, intuitive understanding of the original teachings of Buddhism. Lastly, clarity. Clarity is the essence of the Sangha. So why does one become a monk, renounce the world, or become, I should say, a monk or nun to take the vow to renounce the material world? Well, it is a path to attain spiritual clarity. So clarity is really the essence of Sangha. It's not so much the individuals who are in it, because those individuals come and go. Some will pass on. Some revert back to non-clergy status. This is much more often seen in the West than in the East. In Asia, to join Sangha, to become a monk or nun, is a lifelong commitment. Once you're in it, that's it. That's going to define the rest of your life. In the West, there are many examples of people who seem very serious about becoming, for instance, a monk, but then after a while, they get tired of it, and then they decide to revert back to their worldly status. There's nothing that anyone can do about that, but this is the reason why sometimes Western practitioners are not really taken all that seriously. Sometimes they're seen more as spiritual tourists. Once they're tired of it, that's it, they go home. Now, the three treasures of Huineng, as you can see, correspond to the three treasures of Buddhism. And lastly, what we talked about previously was the main topic of our talk today, and that is the three treasures of the Tao. So these are compassion, conservation, and not daring to be ahead in the world. And that's from the way that Lao Tzu expressed it, so we're keeping it the same. But not daring to be ahead in the world is simply another way to describe a humble state of mind. That is one of the treasures of the Tao. So today, we're going to go deeply into all three. Last time, we began with the sentence in line 7, I have three treasures, and we went from there to talk about the different sets of three treasures. Today, we'll start with the line right after that. I hold on to them and protect them. The I in this line is Lao Tzu referring to himself. So Lao Tzu holds on to the three treasures because they are precious. He protects them because they are precious. Let me put up the bullet there. Lao Tzu holds on to the three treasures because he cherishes them for being precious. And following the lead of Lao Tzu, sages and Tao cultivators likewise cherish the three treasures. You and I have the same opportunity to learn about the three treasures, to, I hope, adopt them as our own, to hold on to them as Lao Tzu does, to protect them ourselves. And I would say that the more you know them, the more you put them to use in everyday life, the more you will see their power. They are very powerful tools for cultivation. And it is also possible for us to map them to other sets of three treasures for greater understanding. And we will do that when we get to the end of our discussion on these three treasures. For now, let me just have everyone think about the three treasures, that they are seen as precious, and talk a little bit about why that is. Why indeed are the three treasures considered to be so precious? So speaking in terms of analogies and metaphors, think of the three treasures as the light that provides illumination in darkness. Perhaps we can think of them as a boat that provides safe passage through stormy seas. Perhaps we can think of the three treasures as water that extinguishes the fire burning down the house. The fire burning down the house is a metaphor taught by the Buddha as a metaphoric description of human suffering. Human suffering is like the fire that is burning down existence. Existence is the dimension in which we live. So basically, when we accept, understand, and adopt the three treasures as our own, we can get to know ourselves better. We can open up the heart. We can utilize them, reap their benefits. They remind us to not be too attached to the world, the material world. They're still the three treasures, which themselves are formless. They are not things. So remind us of the importance of intangibles, the principles, the ideas, the concepts, how they are actually more important and more precious than physical objects, than belongings, material things. At the end of the day, we have to utilize the three treasures to return to the true self. So that's ultimately what we need to do with the three treasures. So now let's go through them one by one, starting with the first. Here's the pinyin, and many people studying Chinese will have trouble with this particular sound. The pinyin spelled C-I, it's like, what, C? What is that? It doesn't suggest anything. It's actually more like 慈, as you see there in the parentheses. And what is the meaning? Well, it's kindness. It's a loving, compassionate kindness. It's universal love, essentially, is what it is trying to say. So this line 9, says the first. That's E, that the first character there is the character for one or first. The first is called compassion. And it is the first because it is the most important. It maps to all the treasures of Confucius and the Buddha. Now, we need to go into 慈 much more deeply due to its importance. So let me break it down for everyone. So first of all, I want to say that there are many ways to practice the Tao of compassion. You can think of compassion as charity, that is, giving to the less fortunate. Being generous, being helpful, that is, providing help to people, other people, on a daily basis. You can think of it as being mindful, thoughtful, considerate, minimizing the suffering for others, minimizing negative impact to the environment and to nature. To be compassionate means no cruelty, no killing, no willful harming of living things. It's all about getting in touch with your oneness of the world and everything in it. The meaning of compassion can be seen in multiple levels. Just like following the scheme of the three treasures, we can break it down into 3 advancing levels of understanding, of meaning. Let's start with level 1, or the basic level of compassion. What is that? It's one-on-one personal relationships. This is perhaps the easiest one to see and understand. It's loving, nurturing kindness on a one-on-one individual basis. So it can be seen in family relationships, such as parent to child. In fact, it is probably most often seen in that relationship between mother and father, to their kids. And it is not limited to that. In a family relationship and also relationship with your relatives, there are many other examples of compassion in an extended family structure. So the older members of the family can be treating the younger members of the family with nurturing care, with loving kindness. Perhaps there's a uncle or aunt who is really good, who has always had a great relationship with the nephew or niece, grandparents with the grandchildren, even older siblings to younger siblings, there can be seen the manifestation of compassion. Now, when we talk about one-on-one personal relationships, it's not limited to family. So if you think about other ways where you can have a compassionate relationship where you can have good kindness, nurture, mentoring from one person to another, you could be, for instance, teacher and students. And oftentimes, the teacher can seem like a parent. The students can seem like a child. That's very common. Teacher and students in a more traditional context would be master and disciple. So the master is the teacher, disciple is the students. And yet, we know that when we talk about teacher and students, that's a different feeling that you get than when you think about master and disciple. There seems to be an even closer connection between master and disciple. This is oftentimes recognized in Eastern cultures. It's the dynamics between mentor and mentee. So I think everyone knows that people who practice martial arts, they often speak of their Sifu, S-I-F-U, the Sifu. So Sifu is composed of two characters. In Mandarin, it's pronounced differently, Shifu. Sifu with the S instead of SH comes from the Cantonese dialect, and that's where the term originated, and the Cantonese people were the first to migrate to the West, and therefore brought that term and the pronunciation with them. So the two characters in Sifu or Shifu, the first character is teacher. Shi, the second character, Fu, is father. So Shifu literally is the teacher father, and that points to this parent-like relationship that the master has with the disciple. And you know that when the term Sifu or Shifu comes up, there's a great deal of respect and honor and reverence and also love that exists in that relationship. And to a lesser extent, there's also close personal relationship in other dynamics like the trainer and the trainee, and I generalize that as coach and athlete. That is also someone who provides guidance, provides monitoring, and provides the overall outline of the training to the athlete who is being trained. So you can see similarities in all of these personal dynamics. There can be a loving kindness associated with all of them, and that's how we grow. That's how we become better than we are. Oftentimes, we need that special person to take us to the next level. So compassion plays an important role in those personal dynamics. Then we should talk about the next level of compassion. The broader level of compassion is compassion as it applies to society. Compassion as it manifests in society beyond the one-on-one personal level. So it's not just family, it extends beyond the family to neighborhood, community, and indeed to humanity itself. So it's not just the people you know. A lot of people, you can still feel compassion for them, but you may not know them personally. That is the difference. So let's come up with some examples to make this a little easier to understand. In the context of the Tao Te Ching, when it speaks to the ruler, like the king or the emperor or the queen, a good ruler cares for the people. The welfare of the people matters greatly to the compassionate ruler, is what this is saying. Now, the ruler doesn't know all the subjects individually. That doesn't stop the ruler from feeling compassion for the welfare of all. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Of course, in our world, we no longer have, most of the world no longer have monarchy as a ruling system. But in our world, there's still relationships that are similar to the ruler to the people. For example, we just need to look around and very easily we can see that there are many employers out there who employ people. So there's the relationship between employer and employees. Compassionate employer would care for the welfare of the employees and would set up systems, procedures, processes to further the welfare of everyone. So the employer, the people at the top of the organizational hierarchy may not know everyone at the lower levels, but it doesn't need to stop them from caring about everybody. Now you can further generalize from that. Here you can tell that we're talking about the relationship between the one to the many. So as an example, you might say initially that, well, you know, I'm not a ruler, I'm not a king, I'm not an emperor, I'm not, and for many people, I'm not an employer. So why would I care about this? Well, one to many dynamics still exist for everybody. Example, a responsible person cares about the common good. That is, when you're out somewhere in a public setting, your compassion for the common good, for the welfare of society in general, for everybody else, including all the people you don't know, that concern, that compassion will keep you from messing the place up, like throwing your trash all over the place, as one example. And same thing, as an individual, a concerned citizen may wish to improve the community. You may want to, for instance, do something nice for the neighborhood, do something that is to everyone's convenience. Perhaps you don't know everybody in the neighborhood. That doesn't stop you from caring. And you can also see that there's always going to be people who get involved with politics or run for office. We know that some of them will do it for the ego gratification, selfish reasons, right? That's definitely possible. But at the same time, we also know that there's going to be some who are motivated by compassion. That is, they feel they can do some good if they succeed in running for office. Now, you don't have to, as I mentioned, you don't have to be at that level to have compassion. You can just be a regular, everyday person who has compassion for the culture in which we live. Therefore, you want to do good. Maybe even just driving on the road. You're a good driver who shares the road with everybody. You don't fly into a fit of road rage out of compassion for all the other drivers on the road. You don't know who they are. That doesn't stop you from feeling compassion. So this is the broader level, the one-to-many, not the one-on-one. I think you see the difference here. Let's move on to the third and final level of compassion. And that is the Dow level. This is compassion that is applied universally. So in this level, it goes from people to more than just people. There is a good commentary on this chapter of the Tao Te Ching where there is a sage that wrote his thoughts about it to illustrate this particular idea, going from compassion for just individuals, for people, to more than just that. The sage is Han Feizi. Han Feizi was an ancient sage Chinese philosopher for the legalist movement, the legalist school, which is not that well known to those who are not involved in Eastern studies, Fajia. And he lived during the Warring States period. So he was also someone who lived in the same period of time, historical period, as Lao Tzu. He certainly had a copy of the Tao Te Ching, and he wrote a commentary on this particular chapter and many other chapters. So here's what he wrote. 爱子者，慈于子；众生者，慈于生；贵公者，慈于世。What does all that mean? Here is the translation. Those who love children have compassion for children. Those who cherish life have compassion for the self. Those who value work have compassion for their tasks. So let me break it down for everyone here. We've already seen the first aspect of it. That's the basic level of compassion. So it's the personal, it's the individual. The second one is moving it to something that is a little bit different, a different angle, compassion for oneself. This is not a strange idea, or it should not be a strange idea for us, because think about what happens when we ourselves say expressions like, hey, you gotta take care of yourself. Be good to yourself. Haven't we all heard that? The whole idea is that you should treat yourself with kindness, that compassion can be applied to the self as well. Hey, listen, you gotta take it easy on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. Okay? A familiar concept. And that's what this particular sage was talking about. Now, what about the third one? The third line there about work, tasks, that's no longer people. So the advanced thinking of this particular sage is to elevate a step at a time, yet another angle about tasks. This compassion for tasks is about having the proper respect for the task at hand. Do it right. Do it once, so you don't have to redo from scratch. And you definitely see that when we have compassion for society, it's having the proper respect for society. See the connection there? And this is also about seeing the importance and value in the things you have to do. Just like when you have compassion to other people, it's because you see their value and importance as human beings. Parents definitely think that about their children. They love them. And you too, you can love what you do. You can enjoy your work. You can honor your work. So this is more of an advanced concept, but we can still understand it by using the other levels as a guide. Therefore, we are now truly at the universal application of the Dow level, where compassion can manifest in all different aspects of life. And that can include not just people, but also principles, ideals, and beliefs. Things that are intangible, things that we cannot touch, but we can definitely relate to. We can cherish, we can honor, we can value these intangibles, thus having compassion for them. Lastly, one last point about compassion is about the connection and relationship between them. As I mentioned, 慈 is the first and the most important treasure. I want to point out that it is intimately connected to the other two treasures, the conservation and not daring to be ahead in the world. It is connected. It implies them. It is integrated with them. For instance, you conserve your resources and not waste them because you care. You care about using the resources wisely. Therefore, compassion leads to conservation of resources. Second example, you become naturally humble because you wish to be of service to the others, to other people. Again, it is because you care. And that is why you serve, you provide support to the others from the back, not daring to be ahead in the world. You want to support them first and foremost out of this compassion in your heart. So what you have heard just now is a very thorough and detailed exploration of the virtue, the treasure of compassion. I think everyone can see that even with just one of the three treasures, that the material is rich with meaning. There is a whole lot to explore. Let's continue that exploration. We now move to the line below, line 10. The second is called conservation. So conservation here means not wasting resources. So this concept has been translated in different ways. For instance, being thrifty, being frugal. So those are all okay translations, but it is important to note that conservation is something that is an idea that better captures the original. It's not just frugal, not just being frugal. Conservation is about wise utilization of resources. That is, frugal, thrifty, it denotes into sort of like being a miser that restrict what you do, restrict what you use. Conservation, however, is not just about that. It's about restricting when the utilization will not do a whole lot of good, that it will be ineffective or impractical. When you conserve appropriately, you are still free to utilize as much as you need when it will do the most good. So that's what I mean by utilizing resources wisely. At a deeper level, the concept of conservation in the Tao is also about keeping everything as simple as possible. When you simplify your life, everything works better. When you simplify your life, the simplification results not just in conservation of resources, but also conservation of your mental energies, conservation of the time, of the precious time that you have. Very often, I think that we don't think of our mental faculties and the time that we spend as resources, but they are valuable resources that we should also conserve. So we should pay attention selectively where that attention will do the most good. Now, why is all that necessary? Well, life is finite. So the more that we can simplify and live the life of plainness and simplicity, according to the Pu principle, the better off we're going to be. So in conclusion, remember, conservation, not about just being thrifty or frugal, not about being a miser, not about spending less. It's also about using resources where they will do the most good. And you can get to that point by clearly seeing what has to be done. What are you here to accomplish? And what are the resources that you need to utilize to get to that result? Now, let's also touch on the third treasure. The third treasure is called not daring to be ahead in the world. I want to break down this line for you. You can tell just from the above that this line is significantly longer than the previous two lines. Those two lines were 3 characters each. Here, you get a whole sentence. What is that entire sentence? So the third, and then what I want specifically to break down for you is starting on the third character there, 不敢為天下先. So those characters mean, 不 means not, 敢, that's dare, how dare you, that dare. Be, in ahead, literally ahead is the last character there. So syntactically, in Mandarin, that makes a lot of sense. In English, it's a little tougher. And then the two characters before that, 天下 means heaven below, which means the world. So in order to translate effectively, you have to shift the order around a little bit to create a sensible sentence in English. And here, the context of being ahead is unlike what we mean when we say, hey, you got to get ahead in the world. You have to advance yourself in the world. Here, being ahead is specifically about taking on the mantle of leadership, is to be ahead of the crowd so you can lead the charge from the front. And specifically in the Tao context, it's about taking that leadership from an ego-driven perspective. It implies asserting oneself to lead out of ego. Because of that, when we say not daring to be ahead, that is saying not daring to act out of ego, be driven by ego, to assert oneself to the front. And therefore, it is all about humility. It's all about the humble state of mind. In that humble state of mind, you are more concerned about supporting people, supporting the group, play a supporting role in the team. So rather than to assert oneself in the leadership role, which comes from arrogance, the presumption of superiority, you would rather devote yourself to a supporting role to support people in the back. This is what sages do. This is what Tao cultivators do. They support or help or guide or mentor people in the back. And elsewhere in the Tao Te Ching, it is talked about that the sage puts himself or herself in the back, but then people will push him or her to the front, meaning they want the sage to lead. Next, we're going to talk about the reason behind the treasures. All three treasures have a specific reason for being. Let's talk about them. Line 12. Line 12 says, compassionate, thus able to have courage. So let's break down this particular line. We got 4 characters here, so we can come up with 4 English words to map them. The first character, 慈, that's compassionate. Then we have the second character there. That just means therefore. And then the third character means can or able to have, able to do. And then the last character there is courage or courageous. So many characters in Mandarin can be noun and adjective depending on the context. So let's put it together. Compassionate, therefore can courage. What does that mean? Well, as the translation says, compassionate, thus able to have courage. So this is the courage that comes from wanting to protect those you love, what you love. This is the ultimate form of courage. It is far greater than courage that doesn't come from compassion, but perhaps courage from ignorance. Like someone is courageous or brave because they have no idea what they're getting themselves into. That's courage from ignorance. Courage, not because you know what's going on, but because you have no idea what is going on. Haven't we all seen that many times? In life, we oftentimes see this particular flavor of courage. Then there's also the other common form of courage, courage from ego or false bravado. This is where people are, thumping on the chest, asserting how they can beat someone up, how they can do it because they are stronger than anyone else, etc. Ego-driven courage. It's the braggart. It's the people who are rash and will do things they regret later on. It's a false form of courage. Then there's also yet another form of courage that we see all the time. Also a false form of courage, courage while under the influence. So people sometimes describe this as, courage from the bottle, courage from whiskey, etc. When someone is drunk, maybe they get into this false form of courage, and then they want to, pick a fight with other people. That is not true courage at all. It is certainly not the spiritual form of courage that comes from compassion. Now, when we talk about that spiritual form of compassion, that eventually results in courage, the spiritual, true, authentic courage, I want to be clear on the process that goes from one to the other. So I want to break it down for you in this slide coming right up. Compassion. Now, remember, compassion is the loving kindness. It's the kindness toward humanity, kindness toward others, and it can be kindness toward a principle, an idea, a concept, etc., as we have talked about. It can be one-on-one, or it can be one to multiple individuals or many. So initially, feeling compassion, it leads to the need to guard, protect, or defend. To guard, protect, or defend that which you love. And the easiest way to see that may be the protective instincts that parents have for the young. Then that protective instinct, that need to guard, to safeguard, to defend, it leads to determination. That is a determination to protect that leaves no room for doubt or hesitation. And in that determination is derived courage. And this is what the sages talk about, that when you don't have any doubts as to what you need to do to protect someone, that is called courage. When you proceed with determination, that is called courage. The symbol for this kind of courage, I've got Mama Bear here, as you can see. So Mama Bear is now a popular expression within our culture. It doesn't just apply to the bear. Mama Bear, we know most of the time, the bear is just minding his or her own business. Mama Bear is just doing her own thing. But when it comes to protecting her cub, she can be the fiercest warrior the world has ever seen. We all know that's the case, and we see that not just among bears, but also pretty much all living things. The tigress, the lioness, the mom, the human mother who is protecting her baby. These become determined, protect, defending with no doubt or hesitation. That's the true form of courage. Then let's dig a little deeper into conservation as well. So Lao Tzu says, conserving, thus able to reach widely. 4 characters. Let's break them down. The first character there is conserve. Then the second character is the same as last time, so it's translated the same way. Therefore, third character also the same, also translated in the same way, can or able to. And then the last character means wide or widespread. So what it says is what the translation says. Conserving, thus able to reach widely. This is all about thoughtful utilization of resources for greater impact. So the idea is that our various resources are finite. So is the time that we have in this world. Once you have experienced a more spiritual kind of awakening, there are likely going to be many things that you're going to want to accomplish. And how do you realize that vision? How do you realize it to the utmost? Well, you have to budget your expenditure. You have to manage your time. You have to choose your priorities wisely. This is because you realize that life is precious. It's too short. You cannot afford to waste any of it, especially if you have a greater purpose. So this one principle applies to material resources, to your precious time, your energy, whether it's the mental energy to consider and plan out a problem, or energy to get things done. For all of these, we know that when you simplify your life, you can get more done with what you have. So it corresponds to, maps to, is congruent with the principle of conserving. So let's also talk about how we go from conserving to being able to reach widely. Same process as before. Conserving, when you have the mentality to conserve resources, it means you gain clarity on those resources. You know what you have on hand or what you can gain access to versus what you're going to need. And when you compare what you have to what you will need, then you know how to budget, you know how to plan, you know how to allocate wisely for the greatest possible effect. You don't want to waste it all at once, then you got nothing more that you can use after that. Thus, you are able to reach widely. The symbol for this is an easy one. I use water because conservation of water is going to be very much on everybody's mind when water is scarce. So it makes a lot of sense for us to conserve the utilization of water to just what will do the most good, to make a limited amount of water go as far as we possibly can make it go. So I think that makes sense. Now, let's go to the third one. I would like to take everyone through a similar process. The third treasure says, not daring to be ahead in the world. In previous chapter, in chapter 66, we had repeated references to leadership. And the metaphor that was used in 66, for those that follow that particular talk, it was about being the king of 100 valleys, which means being a river that collects from the streams or the ocean that collects from the river. And in order to do that, you must start by taking the lowest position. A lower position, meaning humility, in order to collect the water from those who contribute. So that is the repeated reference to leadership and the metaphor for that. So the Tao leader, the Tao idea, the Tao concept of leadership is one who supports everyone from the back, providing support, being very humble in that regard. And this is the kind of person that people want as a leader. What this means is twofold. It isn't that as a Tao cultivator, you insist just on supporting and nothing else. It means you gladly play the role of leadership or the supporting role. Either way, it's whatever you can do for the greatest good for the group. Therefore, the Tao cultivator is glad to lead if called upon to do so. If the others feel that you can do well as a leader, they want to follow you, the Tao cultivator is happy to take on that duty and then utilize the Tao to lead others to a better future. Then, if that is not the case, if no one is calling upon you to lead, the Tao cultivator is just as glad to play a supporting role. No problem. The Tao cultivator can play any role that is for the good of the group. That's the bottom line. Now let's go to the next line. Next line says, thus able to assume leadership. It is precisely because of that the Tao practitioner is able to play any role as long as it's for the good of the group, that person is actually a great fit for leadership, because that person's first and foremost impulse is to benefit the group. So then we come to this expression that you see here, leadership, 气长. Let me bring this up for everyone to see. And here I can already guess that qi, qi, that's already going to give people some trouble. They may not realize that qi, q in pinyin system is supposed to be like ch. So what do these characters mean? 气长. Literally, the first character is an instrument or a tool. Here, it refers to a person who is an instrument in an organization. The second character, 长, is senior. So the meaning, when you put these two characters together, is a senior level leader among all the people in the group. Now, this expression is no longer used in modern Mandarin. However, modern Mandarin has many other expressions that utilize the same character in different ways. 长者 is a senior person. 长官 is a commanding officer or a senior official. So now we want to do the same thing that we have done with the other treasures. That is, we want to talk about the process of going from the mental states of humility, not daring to be ahead in the world, leading to the leadership position. So in the same format that we showed the progression before, let me start out with the square on the left-hand side, not daring to be ahead in the world. So first of all, you start by being in the back. You start by playing a supporting role. Support the group. Do what the group needs for the best interests of everyone else. And in the process of doing that, you are building a positive relationship with everyone. And because of that, when the time comes that the group feels leadership is necessary, based on the strength of the supporting role, the relationships that you have built, everyone wants you to take on the mantle of leadership. So this is the process. And indeed, this is the process that is referred to multiple times in the Tao Te Ching in many different ways. I will use just one example to share with everyone. So you saw Mama Bear before, you saw water for conservation. Here, I'm going to show you what it looks like elsewhere in the Tao Te Ching. In fact, the previous chapter that we went over, the previous chapter that we studied and discussed, 66. Let's see what it says. Thus, if sages wish to be over people, they must speak humbly to them. If they wish to be in front of people, they must place themselves behind them. It's the same exact idea using the same metaphors. Leadership is actually about humility. It's not about personal glory. So now, with this particular section, you can see how the three treasures come to be, what they imply, and how to go from one to the other. That is a good logical stopping point for that part of our discussion. There is way more to talk about, and I'm going to give everyone a preview of what we will talk about next time by way of summary. We are approaching the end of our time together today, so let me jump to the summary. I want to start by reminding everyone of the summary slide from last time. It was a summary of the three treasures. So remember, the challenge for all of us, the challenge that I hope everyone will continue to take on in the week to come, is to start practicing the three treasures. The first one is compassion. Therefore, the challenge is to be compassionate. The suggestion is to be open to opportunities to say a kind word to someone. And perhaps, hopefully, you will have many opportunities to do that for many people that you come across. Number two, conserve resources. And here, the challenge is that I would like to ask everyone to look around, to be open-minded and receptive, to look at what's happening around you to see if you can identify wasteful practices in your environment, in different settings. This is because awareness is first before practicing this as a virtue, as a treasure that you hold on to. Number three from last time is not daring to be ahead in the world, meaning humility. So the challenge is to be humble. So what would be a supporting role that you can play? Whether it's the family or the workplace or any other setting, what are some things that you can do to support the group? So this is a reiteration of the same summary that we had last time, and it's the same summary this time because what we have done is that we have talked about the reasoning behind all three of the treasures. The next summary slide is going to be a preview of next time. So what we're going to talk about next time has to do with the other side of the coin, the dark side, if you will. It's going to be for compassion. What if you have courage without compassion? We talked about compassion leading to courage, but what if it's just courage and there's no compassion at the heart of it? Well, what you end up with is senseless brutality, violence for the sake of violence. That we all know is extremely negative. We've already got way too much of it in the world. Number two, what if you reach widely, but you don't conserve? If you try to do that, then what's going to happen is falling short, running out of resources early on, exhaustion. So I think it's useful for us to talk about this preview because they reinforce all the concepts that we just went over on the three treasures. Same with the last one, and this one sounds a little different. Ahead without behind. What does that mean? Ahead means to lead from the front position. Behind means to support everyone from the back. If you assert yourself in the leading position without being willing to support everyone from the back, that also leads to a very negative consequence. Specifically, it is short-lived leadership despised by all. So now you see the two sides. You see why we need to do what we do, why we need to hold on to the three treasures. And then here in this slide, you see why we should be aware of practicing incorrectly without the essential ingredients of the Tao. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.